after a nice little break from Classic Who, I'm back to tackle Season 3 of the show's original run. I've had a lot of fun reviewing a couple of Doctor Who books and not playing Horizon Forbidden West in the meantime, so I'm feeling nice and refreshed. So join me as I delve deep into the recently released overpriced Blu-ray for Galaxy 4's animated reconstruction. Before we begin, I just wanted to say two quick things. Firstly, thank you to Andrew Bowman for pointing out that Vicky is in fact not short for Victoria, and in fact the second Doctor eventually gets a companion called Victoria, just to be confusing. And secondly, despite being so careful and precise with what official clips I use in these reviews, especially after the whole Dalek fiasco, a month after my
Web Planet review
was posted with an extended but still edited scene used for comedic effect, it got done for copyright. Yeah, sure, I can appeal the claim and all that rubbish, but come on, we all know that's a lengthy and broken process, and honestly, I'll be lucky if my videos even crack 20 views. So from now on, I will be heavily limiting my visual aid and using next to no official audio from these old episodes. Not that anyone cared to begin with, I suppose. Okay, 1965's Galaxy 4. The first Doctor, Stephen and Vicky, arrive on a planet doomed to explode in a few days' time. On one side, you have the Dravins, led by just the most wonderful, delightful commanding officer, Marga. Then, on the other side, you have the evil Roombas. Of course I'm joking. These little discount Dalek knockoffs get nicknamed quite early on by Vicky as Chumblies. I assumed that would wear off eventually and we'd get like a proper name for them, but nope. So the entire story, everyone just refers to their supposed enemies as Chumblies. Ooh, here comes a threatening Chumbly, better run and hide or just stand still and let them roll past you. Oh yeah, did I mention that they're completely blind and they can only detect you through sound? Oh, but they can only detect sound from directly in front of them, so if you're back there, you know, you're fine. They really are terrible. Well, despite all of that, they still have some pretty powerful weaponry, so for the time being, they are the greatest threat. Until the completely obvious bait and switch. Yeah, you've seen it a few times before. Even in Doctor Who, where the supposed bad guys turn out to be not so bad after all. Kinda like the Censorites. Only it's far more blatant here. There's not really an attempt at covering up how truly sinister Marga is, and how non-confrontational these little robots are. After all, they are being controlled by the Rills, another species marooned on this planet, trying to escape before it goes kaput. What follows is a fairly simple yet well-executed story where friends become adversaries, the opposition become allies, and they join forces to help each other escape. Not gonna lie, it's a pretty bog-standard affair, but credit where it's due, the final episode does actually have a pretty good use of tension with characters constantly talking about how little time they have left. I found the little tidbits of different alien cultures to be interesting, particularly with the Dravins, and how they're not exactly evil, just kind of a bunch of dicks, or lack thereof. Especially Marga. She's so unpleasant, and as surprising as her ultimate fate was, I can't say it was undeserved. The Rills provide a nice theme about acceptance, and like, just because they look so grotesque and foreign, while the Dravins look so familiar, doesn't make either of them any less dangerous or friendly. It's all about how you use your intelligence. They explain it better in the story. I know I pretty much just covered the entire plot and everything, but I gotta figure at this point, with the state of the BBC supposedly shutting down any work on future animated reconstructions, I just have to accept that, you know, the majority of people that either watch this or buy the DVD or Blu-ray are already hardcore Doctor Who fans, so they pretty much already know what to expect. If not, sorry for the spoilers. Okay, now for the elephant in the room. If you've seen my review of The Reign of Terror, or already know my opinions on animated reconstructions, then you've probably been expecting this. I'm happy Galaxy 4 can exist in some form after the master tapes were destroyed back in the 60s, but I still don't like this animation style. It looks so dated and cheap. Like, this is basically just Flash animation with a few 3D renders, right? As always, you'll probably get used to it while you watch it, but I still wish it could be better. Because this was my first time watching the story, I chose to go with the widescreen full colour animation, which is colourful and vibrant and can occasionally look nice, but the movement and especially the faces just lack so much needed detail. I mentioned which version I watched because thankfully this release is packed with features and contains at least 4 or 5 different ways of viewing it, depending on what you consider a unique viewing experience. So on disc 2, you've got the full color widescreen animation, while on disc 1, you've got the same animation, but in a smaller aspect ratio, and it's presented in black and white. In the special features, you've got a screenshot reconstruction with added transitional text, which is essentially an official take on those loose cannon telesnap reconstructions. And even then, you can watch it as is, or an alternative version with narrative dialogue in a sort of audiobook style. And finally, 6 minutes of surviving footage from episode 1 and the entirety of the recently discovered episode 3. I don't know how long they can keep calling it recently discovered. I mean, it was on the Aztecs bonus disc. I mean, that's what, 2 or 3 years old? 2013! How is that recent? This is 10 years old. And to get a better idea of what the original was going for, I opted to watch all the surviving footage, as well as have a quick peek into the black and white version, and the still image reconstruction, and oh my goodness, this is what really made the animation fall apart for me. Just the act of watching one proper live action episode as it originally aired was so much more enjoyable than watching this basic animation. It's such a shame that this was lost, because the sets looked really cool, and the creature designs for the quaint little chumblies and the rills were legitimately creative. I would have loved to have seen this in its original format. Basic story be damned. Damn you, classic television, for being so antiquated. I guess it made sense to adapt this story into animation due to the admitted lack of variety in locations and fairly basic costume and creature designs. But even then, the animation cheaps out on that as well. There are 3 Draven minor characters that have the exact same copy-paste design. Like, they are literally identical character models. Sure, you could argue that in that circumstance there were story reasons, but there's another instance which absolutely breaks continuity. There's a short exchange in the animated episode 3 where Vicky commands one of the Chumbly to roll forward and then backwards as a kind of demonstration. Problem is, Vicky is standing behind the Chumbly, and they made the point in the same episode that they have no rear hearing. They can only hear what's right in front of them. Now, on its own, I would gladly say that it's just a small oversight, you know, nothing out of the ordinary for classic sci-fi television. Except, get this, in the same scene in the recovered live-action episode 3, Vicky is standing in front of the Chumbly, so it can clearly hear and follow directions. This blatant lack of attention to detail literally creates a plot hole, and while it doesn't ruin anything, it just proves my worst fears. That going forward, all these animated reconstructions just gonna let me down time and time again. I hate to sound ungrateful. This is better than nothing, and those who worked on it deserve recognition. I just wish it could be better. So, with all these different ways of watching it, which do I recommend? Honestly, I'll leave it up to you. They each have their pros and cons, so it really is personal choice. I'm glad we actually have the choice, and that it's all packed tightly onto 2 discs, rather than scattered all around the place on that 3-disc terrible Web of Fear remake. Actually, that's something to take away from this. It could always be worse. To end things on a positive note, while watching certain parts a second time, I noticed a cool detail. Quite early on in the story, one of the more obvious signs that Marga might not be the friendly face we assume she is when she goes on this extended monologue about how she's going to leave the others to die, and keeps going on about how the fear will creep into their eyes as they realise they're about to perish. And, spoiler alert, that's exactly how she goes out. It's such a shame a lot of their actors' subtleties were lost in translation. In the animation, she's, ironically, a lot less animated than her live-action counterpart. So many neat little details. The smirks when nobody's watching. The way she sticks her nose up at everyone she deems inferior. A proper decent villain. Unfortunately, none of that really carries over from the live action. I think that's everything. Oh, yes! In my review of the Aztecs, I mentioned how there was a 30-minute abridged version of Galaxy 4 on the special features disc, and I said that I would cover it here. But, fun fact, while disc 1 plays perfectly fine in New Zealand DVD players, disc 2 is region locked, so I can't play it. It's so strange. I have never experienced anything like this before. Oh well. I've already spent twice as long talking about one serial than I meant to. Consider it making up for next week's episode, and yes, I do mean singular episode. Tune in next time for the only single episode story in the entirety of classic Doctor Who, Mission to the Unknown. And watch as I ramble on about it for way too long. Thank you for watching, you absolute legends. Have a great day.